The following radio show takes place between 12:01 a.m. and 2-ish a.m. Events occur in fake time.
This is Alec Baldwin. I'd like to invite you to listen to my new limited series podcast about a true American hero.
All right. It is Lighthouse Jock number 12. And it's a very exciting night. First of all, it's our first Friday night together. Ladies and gentlemen, it's our first Friday night live. And we will be doing that every week, every Friday evening at midnight Eastern. And I want to give a fair warning, first of all, before we start, because up till now, we've done nothing but pre-recorded shows, and there's going to be a key difference between the pre-recorded shows and the live shows. Now, keep in mind, look, I did promise it, okay? I promised it on the pre-recorded shows. But we are, and by we, I mean I, I am going to leave the pre-recorded shows, or not the pre-recorded shows. Sorry, it's been a tough night. I gotta unwind a little bit. We're supposed to have some fun. Fun. I was about to say GD again. No, can't do that anymore. I can say but GD is off limits. Also, using Jesus' name in vain is off limits now, but that's not stopping the okay? The are still coming out, but anyway, so I am going to leave the uncensored live version up on the YouTube channel if you want to see the uncensored version. But fair warning, first of all, before we really dive into the meat and potatoes here, that if you are watching the live show and you are not a fan of the F word, there's going to be some F words. There's going to be some S words. There's probably not going to be as many C words. Look, who says as often? I don't think a lot of people really say it here. I'm not Australian. I mean, if I was, then, we would. Okay, sure. I'd just blast out every other word, but no, not Australian. So not going to be as many of those, but, just in case, I'm going to leave it open just in case it happens to ever come up. I'm going to keep myself perfectly liable to be able to say it. But if you can't handle that stuff, then you can continue to listen to the podcast, which, look, the podcast is going to continue to be bleeped out every time. Okay. And the YouTube VOD, like the edited version that goes up on the YouTube channel, those are also still going to be or continue to be edited out, right? Or at least the swears are going to continue to be edited out. So fair warning, if you can't handle the heat, then you might want to wait until the podcast gets posted. Also, we're not going to be doing it tonight, but in the future, I will be able to take your calls. Like, for instance, if you were hypothetically next week to call 423-523-9442, then just hypothetically, if you were to do that next week, I mean, you can try it today. I've got the screen up, but I might not answer it today. I don't know. Plus, I got to make all the graphics and all the cool stuff and, put it up on the screen or do the little scrolly thing because like a zoomer, unless like something is scrolling across the screen. I might need to make a like a repeatable Subway Surfer video, and you just like plant it on the screen like 3 times. Look, in order to get Zoomers to watch the videos, here's what I've learned, right? And I'm not saying this from TikTok experience, but I've seen a couple of them here and there. I usually hate TikTok, but how the Zoomer brain works, right, is as soon as they see a video pop up, okay, unless it has like a Subway Surfer video like on the top, and then it has like an inaudible Family Guy clip for some reason also in there, you need to have like 3 different things in order to properly stimulate their brain. And that's what every TikTok video ends up being. It's like, you know, the meat of the video, like maybe kind of tucked away in the corner, like the thing that you're supposed to be watching. And meanwhile, everything else is just a Subway Surfer video, just OCD or ADD guy running through the subway collecting coins like Sonic the Hedgehog, and Family Guy clip, a whole bunch of unrelated stuff, because that's the only thing that that keeps their brain stimulated. Don't ask me why. I don't know. I can't claim to know their generation, but you know, next week, 423-523-9442. I'll take some of your calls as they come in next week. I'm also working on a Q&A website that you can head over to and type questions for, and we will do a Q&A segment at some point in the future. It might be at the end. I don't know. Look, I haven't hatched this out. I'm just kind of spitballing here. Do I look like I'm a guy that has a plan for anything? Maybe some things. Anyway, so welcome to the first live show of, I can't say, I say first live show, even though we've already done a test version of a live show a few weeks ago. So the first intended live show of 2024. We will be here. I keep saying we, but I'm assuming that you're out there too, and you're also collectively part of the we. I know that's a unhealthy assumption to make, but I'm going to make it anyway. But we'll be here every Friday evening at midnight. So we got that. We'll take some of your calls starting next week once I get a little bit more of the stuff done. Today, I previewed it. I told you it was coming. And coming up in a little bit, we are going to do Who Wants to Be a Hater, which is, don't get me wrong, okay? There's a lot of game shows out there. And Who Wants to Be a Hater is, I would say, without a doubt, the greatest game show in all of podcasting history. I'm just going to be honest here. Look, I call it as I see it, and I've never heard another game show on any other podcast that has been as riveting and captivating as Who Wants to Be a Hater. So we're going to play that again. I've got 2 more cringe commercials that we are going to pit up against each other in the ultimate battle to the death, and we're going to see which one is the most cringe, and I will put the game to a vote, and you will get to decide for yourself which one of these commercials is the most terrible, which one of them sparks the most hatred, which one of them makes you want to go on the biggest rant of your entire life. And I will admit, one of these hits, one of the ones that we've got today, kind of sparks that drive. It sparks a little bit of a rant. I'm not going to lie. So we'll see it as it comes up. But we're going to pit those 2 of them against each other. And then coming up at the end, we will, of course, cap it all off with Lighthouse Shock Jock Bible Study. To cap it all off, of course. Look, it's part of my pact, okay? Episode 8 was the game changer. It was not a bit, you know. That's part of my pact with him, is every time. And this comes at a good time, too, because I'm just starting to kind of reconnect with him after a rough couple of weeks of kind of falling off a little bit. And here's the thing. It turns out that, you know, when you kind of isolate yourself and let yourself spiral down into a bad headspace, it's going to happen, right? It's going to happen that you spiral out of control and then you lose connection with him. And then it turns out that part of the start of the reconnection with him happened to be listening to a piece of advice that he gave me last week. Now, last weekend, I went to Nashville with my dad and my brother. I live a couple hours away from it. Who knows in what direction? Could be west, could be east. I don't know. Who knows? I do know, and I'm sure it'll be made public one day, but for now, who cares? But took the couple hour drive to Nashville, and I wasn't going to do it, but something was telling me that day to, look, you should go. You should go. I wasn't going to go, but I felt like God was telling me to go on that Saturday. And so I did. I had a nice, interesting time. Spent the Saturday night and the most of next Sunday afternoon just kind of walking around downtown Nashville. And it's pretty cool. It's a very interesting little place to go. I know it gets the reputation as... By the way, I guess I'll start here, right? So, first of all, Nashville is supposed to have the reputation as like, look, it's the music city. There's so much history of music in Nashville, and I know it gets the reputation as like the country music kind of place, but it's not. I don't know if I'd call it exclusively a country music place. I think it's trying to bill itself. The city, it's trying to bill itself as just a general music place. Now, I ended up wanting to go. I was hoping, right? Like, look, I am a sucker for audio equipment, right? So I was hoping that, maybe someplace I could go and there would be some kind of music history museum, and there might still be. Don't get me wrong. It's not like I scoured every block and every square inch of it to see exactly everything that they had to offer. Look, I only had one afternoon, okay? And it was a Sunday afternoon. And by the way, there is a clear divide in downtown Nashville, right? So, first of all, why does every downtown area has a Church Street? It has a Broadway. It has a Main Street. Go to your biggest downtown capital and find your Church Street. Downtown Orlando has one. Downtown Nashville has one. And look, I get that I'm only using a sample size of 3 from seeing downtown Knoxville and Nashville and Orlando in the last couple of years, but I think that's enough. I think that's a big enough sample size to say that, look, every downtown has a Main Street. Every downtown has a Broadway Street. Every downtown or Broadway Avenue. I don't know. And every downtown has what was the third one that I was talking about? Oh, yeah, Church Street. Yeah. So I don't get it. Is it like a government mandate that every downtown has to have a Church Street? Curious. So there's a clear divide, right? And the only thing that I could liken this to, the only thing that I could possibly compare this to is the theme parks. If anybody's ever been to the theme parks in Orlando, there's a very distinct characteristic of a thing that is made for tourists. And it almost feels like you can tell when an area is designed specifically for tourists, right? And so we started our trip to downtown Nashville on Sunday afternoon. We saw this thing called Bicentennial Park, I think, which had like a replication of this giant Greek architecture that was just surrounded by nothing. Like, there are 3 patches of grass. There are 3 patches of grass that are like right outside where Bicentennial Field is, and those patches of grass are all like brown. And the patches of grass that are immediately surrounding it, like, those are green. Those look like they are well manicured patches of grass. And look, they get walked on the same amount. So what makes certain grass green and certain grass just totally brown? I'm not entirely sure about that. But also, it costs $20 to get inside. And that's the thing that sparked the walk around downtown. Was we were just originally going to walk around Bicentennial Park just to do some sightseeing and check out how cool the area was. But it turns out that in order to use the restroom, you have to pay for like a $20 ticket to get inside. Like, no, I'm not doing that. Let's walk to another business establishment somewhere downtown and find it. And find a restroom. So that's ended up sparking like, oh, look, we're already so far away. We might as well just keep walking down the main street and see what there is. And where the locals go and where the tourists go are two entirely separate things. It feels like there's a very clear divide. Like, there's literally one block, like one street that you cross that separates where the rest of the city is and where all of the tourist trap restaurants are. You know, like all the music themed restaurants. Oh, there's this one restaurant called like Honky Tonks Barbecue or some shit. I've heard that it's really good, and every one of them has live music playing inside of it, right? And if anybody's ever heard of you probably have, because it's somewhat of a national chain, at least in the Southeast. You know, I've seen a whole bunch of them in the Southeast. I don't know if there are mellow mushrooms anywhere else besides the Southeast, or if it's just a Southeast kind of brand. But, you know, there are apparently in this tourist trap area, I might just be talking out of my ass here, but it looked like what was the very, very OG mellow mushroom, right? And remember how I said earlier that just about every one of these tourist trap places that you go down, I think it was like once you get like halfway down Broadway or whatever it is in downtown Nashville, right? You see where the tourist trap areas are. Every one of them has live music playing inside of it. Now, keep that in mind, because what would you think about the live music that the tourist trap places in the Music City? They even call themselves the City of Music, right? Here's what you would think. Here's what you would guesstimate, right? That all of, or at least a decent amount of the music that is playing in most of those drinking establishments, which, by the way, it was probably good to go down there sober, because you would waste a whole bunch of money. Like, you would waste so much damn money just going and drinking that it almost seems like it's not even worth it to go. It is probably worth it to go, but I can imagine drinks are expensive. Sucks to be an alcoholic. But back to the story, I guess. So you would think that each one of these establishments has at least somewhat decent of a band playing in it, right? Because it's supposed to be the City of Music, right? It's supposed to be the City of Music. That would be the one place that I would expect that I could go anywhere in the downtown tourist trappy area and find somebody that, you know, or at least find an establishment that has live music that isn't terrible. And don't get me wrong, I'm really not like trying to hate on people that play live music, because a lot of them were good. Like, you know, a lot of the places that you walk down, they did ended up sounding pretty good. But we went to what I might be talking out of my ass here for as it looked pretty retro, the OG Mellow Mushroom, because we had to stop in and just, my brother wanted to get a slice. I fast on Sundays, so I sat in the Mellow Mushroom and just didn't eat anything. I drank a Diet Coke, and it was fine. It was fun. Fun to do some sightseeing. And the band that was playing there that day, it was just awful, man. Like, it was legitimately the most awful thing that I've ever heard in my entire life. And there was a very, very hefty elder lady that the only thing that made the walk into Mellow Mushroom salvageable was this very hefty elder lady who was clearly doing some drinking. And she had by the way, here's how you can tell that you're a tourist, basically here's how you can tell the tourists apart in Nashville, right? They apparently, and I don't know where to find these, but all the tourist girls that are walking around Nashville, they all have the exact same black cowboy hat on, right? There must be some kind of pop-up shop that you could buy the tourist black cowboy hat in that they must sell. And look, you can't say you've gone to Nashville unless you have the black tourist cowboy hat and you walk around the downtown touristy area. It's got to have a name, but I have no idea what it is. Look, people from Nashville, please tell me, what's the tourist trap area? Look, the rest of you probably live in the real part of the city and you never really go to where the tourist trap area is because it's like you get a fill of it and all right, I've had enough. I've had enough. So the band that was playing there was so terrible, and it caused this like giant hefty elderly lady to get up off of her bench and completely just stumble over, which, okay, if you're a virtue signaler, you're going to say, well, why would you laugh at that? You're supposed to get up and go help them. And nah, it's just funny. It's just funny, man. Some things almost make it worth it. Like that experience alone made me very glad that I decided to go that day, just because I got to see that. Now, the part that I wish that I could unhear is the band that was playing, right? Because you could tell it was so bad that, look, you'd think that everybody that's walking around is going to be in a good mood, and most of them were, until they walk in. Like the people will walk in, like, doing their little dancing, and look, this is great. I'm a tourist. I'm drinking. I'm walking around. I'm enjoying the town, and they're like dancing and vibing to the music that's playing. And then they sit down and they hear this rendition of Black Hole Sun that I doubt that they were an in-house band, but like this rendition of Black Hole Sun that they played at the Mellow Mushroom. I thought this was Nashville. I thought this was Nashville. I thought that people were supposed to be real musicians here. And this, honestly, between the wailing and like just how off the rhythm was, it was the most awful thing that I've ever heard. It was pretty cringe. It was pretty cringe. I'm not going to lie. And so you can see the mood, like you can see the vibe of the tourists that walk in with their black tourist cowboy hats, and they're like, this is great. I'm vibing to the music. I really hope nobody ever captures that on camera, or nobody ever clips that and uses that against me, but whatever. But you can see the vibe of the people that walk in that are like, I'm having a good time. I'm drinking. I'm eating pizza. I am just wearing my damn cowboy hat. And when they sit down and they hear some of the music, like for a little while, most of the other people go, this is terrible. Like you can see the vibe of the people. Like we stayed there long enough to see some people walk in and then also like promptly walk out. And you can tell it's bad when the people walk in and they're just vibing and hooting and hollering and doing the thing. And then they walk out and they're like, oh, I gotta get out of here. I gotta get out of here. But it was a good time. It was still a good time. Look, you have to be able to separate yourself from the situation and just kind of look at it as a giant grand old piece of entertainment and look up and go, you know what? You are funny. You're a funny guy up there. I see what you're doing. By the way, at Bicentennial Park, here's another key difference, right? And I know that this has been a common theme on the show lately, which are key differences between Tennessee and Florida. And I've got another couple of them to add that I noticed over there in Nashville. And everybody, it seems like everybody in the South, in Florida, right, there are, the scale, the 1 to 10 scale, right? In Florida, there seem to be a whole bunch of people at every different increment of the scale, right? Like there's some 1s, there's some 2s, there's some 3s, there's some 4s, all the way up to 10, so on and so forth. And I've noticed how it works in Tennessee, particularly in Nashville, just because there's a greater concentration of them. Here's the deal, okay? In Tennessee, you are either a 2 or you are either a 9 or 10. That's it. There is no in between. There is absolutely no in between. There are no mids. You're either like smoking or, and this goes for both genders, by the way. And look, I may be a,
right? Sexual.
That may be true, but look, I can tell a hot woman when I see one, right? It's not like I'm totally just completely out of touch there, right? So that's the deal. You're either in Tennessee, and this is particularly true in Nashville, as I said earlier, you're either a 2 or you're a 10. And that's just how it goes, right? You're either smoking or you are butt-ass ugly, and it makes me want to just completely turn away and go, I would rather stare into the sun. I would rather stare into the black hole sun and listen to that song again, played by that exact Mellow Mushroom Band. Okay. That's how it works. Seems like in Nashville, by the way, there were more people that inched closer to the 10 side than the 2 side. Here's how it seems to work, right? As you go into the more concentrated areas in Tennessee, you get closer to a greater distribution of 10s versus 2s, right? And then as you go into the outskirts and as you go into the more smaller towns, right, that's where the 2s start to take over, right? That's where the uprising of the 2s happens. And look, I don't make the rules. I just observe and see exactly how reality's playing out, okay? I'm not the one that makes the rules, We all know who makes the rules. He's up there. He's up there, man. And I don't know why he specifically made everyone in Tennessee either a 2 or a 10, but he must have had a clear reason for it. Okay. Who am I to argue with him? So yeah, there's one difference. Here's another difference, right? As I kind of get some more experience in Tennessee, right? First of all, the ducks in Tennessee, yes, I'm talking about the ducks, like the quacking, flapping animals. We saw some ducks in downtown Tennessee, and it's very rare, right, that you kind of stop and just acknowledge the beauty of things sometimes, right? It's very rare that a lot of people stop, and what ends up happening, right, is that they end up getting used to their surrounding environment so often that they start to take it for granted, right? And so one of my goals in life is to be one of those people that like can still wake up every day after having seen something, even the same exact view for like years, and still be incredibly thankful for what I'm seeing, right? And so what I've noticed is I am trying to take that mindset and that kind of attitude and apply it to everything. Like, look, this is why I enjoy sightseeing so much. I just like looking at stuff. I enjoy watching the aesthetic beauty of the world that he's created for us. It's cool, man. So one other difference that I've noticed between Florida and Tennessee, right, is the ducks in Tennessee. They're just straight up more beautiful, man. There was this one duck that I saw before we started walking around downtown over at the Bicentennial Park in Nashville, where that giant Greek building is that they recreated. It might be Roman, I don't know. I wasn't paying too much attention. I was actually more paying attention to the duck, honestly. And this was a beautiful duck, man. This was like classic mallard. You see those mallard statues that are like just so perfectly green feathered on the top of their hair. And I saw this duck like just majestically swimming across the pond and had to sit there and take a moment to appreciate that duck and go, wow, That is a beautiful duck. His colors are beautiful. He looks like he's having a great time swimming. That's just, what a majestic creature. What a majestic creature. And meanwhile, in Florida, all the ducks, like, they look like they have cancer. Like, they all look like they have, like, spots, and they look like they're growing leprosy at every point of their body. Like, I don't understand. The ducks, like, legitimately look like that they all have AIDS over in Florida. I don't know why. And I love ducks, too. It pains me to see an AIDS duck. Okay? It pains me. I feel bad for them. I wished that they did not have AIDS, but unfortunately, again, this is the way that he intended the plan to be. He intended them to look like they have AIDS, so there must clearly be a reason. Anyway. You know another thing that happened, by the way? The Saturday night, right? We went into, like, the night before that we walked around downtown, we went to a different part where all the hipsters are. Apparently, there is a very hipster part of Nashville. Of course there is, right? It's a downtown. You can't have a downtown area without one of the areas being kind of hipster, right? And you wouldn't think this, but what's the deal with there being like a metric ton of lesbians in downtown Nashville? Now, don't get me wrong, it's fine, but there were just an inordinate amount of them, like, and they were all just totally out there too. Like, oh man, the scales too. You know how I said earlier that you're either a 2 or a 10? I saw a lot of lesbian couples, and if you're the 10 in this situation, like, I gotta understand why, right? I'm really not trying to judge here, but if you're one of the 10s in the relationship with the 2 in this situation, there are a lot of lesbian couples in downtown Nashville that are like lesbian couples of a 2 and a 10. Like, what? How? Like, for instance, I saw this one couple, and there was this like giant morbidly obese, like pink-haired, septum piercing, giant like 400-pound woman that was wearing a shirt that said "I love my girlfriend," and she was holding hands with like a very, very other good-looking woman that was walking beside her. And I thought, I just kind of had to sit there and think to myself for a little bit, like, you could do better than that if you really wanted to. Like, you really could. You could do so much better than that if you wanted to. Like, is it even worth, even if this person is even if this morbidly obese 2 is like the greatest and sweetest human being of all time, is it not worth it? She must be the greatest damn person that this other woman has ever met in her entire life in order to keep doing this. I don't know, man. I don't know. A lot of 2s, a lot of 10s, a lot of 2s and 10 lesbian couples together for some reason. I don't get it. I really, really don't get it. But apparently what happens, and I missed this, is sometimes at night they have these tourist buses that kind of drive around. They have like a Twisted Tea bus that drives around, and apparently what happens at night in some of them is that, like, after 10 o'clock at night at a certain point, they stop enforcing the clothing law. And so there are like whole giant buses of topless women in the Twisted tea. I'm sorry. Look, you say topless women, and that it's a little bit of a brainworm. It is a little bit of a brainworm. I'm not gonna lie. So the Twisted Tit Tea tourist bus. There we go. We got it out this time. They stop enforcing the public nudity law, or whatever shit it ends up being. They stop enforcing that after like 10 o'clock at night, right? And so apparently what happens is, and I didn't get to see this, but it would have been interesting to say the least, but apparently what happens is on some of these buses. Like, they stop enforcing it, and so there's just giant buses of topless women all riding around the downtown area of Nashville, and I can't even imagine, like, first of all, why? I mean, well, I guess it also makes sense to a certain degree, right? If there are a lot of lesbians there, then that's what they want to see, you know? They want to see giant buses of topless women, you know? All right, I get it. I get it. It was fun, though. I'm glad I ended up going, right? I almost didn't go, but something told me that, I don't know, God told me that I should go. I think it was fun for my dad, too, to get to hang out for a while over there. Look, it was fun for me, but it probably wasn't even for me, I think, is what he wanted me to go for. So, I don't know. It was interesting. So, if anybody's ever done anything that is, like, more interesting than some of that stuff, I say more interesting as though this is a contest. It's really not supposed to be. There's so much stuff to do over there that, you know, it's hard to fit it all into one afternoon. And I just kind of walked around in my fucking Vans, which my feet hurt like hell the next day. Those are not walking shoes, okay? In fact, they still kind of hurt, like a week later. I feel like I still have tendon pain. So, anyway, if there's anything else that's interesting to do over there, then, or if you have any other, like, fun facts, I suppose, or if anybody's ever been there, then, I don't know, let me know some of your experiences. Tourist area or not, topless women or not, 2 or 10 level experiences. Either way, we don't know. Let me know. So, anyway, I'm going to take a break. And when we come back, the return of the greatest game show in podcasting history. You know it. You love it. We've played it before. And we will return once again with the next edition of Who Wants to Be a Hater. And we will play that when we come back. So stay tuned. Back in a couple minutes if you're listening live. And if you're listening to the podcast, then, you know, look, it's not going to be a couple minutes for you. It's just going to be the next thing. In fact, it'll be coming up, boom, just like that. All right, we're back. And it's time in just a moment to play, as I mentioned earlier, the greatest game in podcasting history. Look, I don't listen to a lot of podcasts, okay? Most of them are terrible. You know, most of them are like true crime, like what's the they all sound so damn fake. They all sound like they're reading from a script. Like, you know, this is an old throwback, and I use it as an intro sometime. But like, look, this is what most podcasts are out there. Look, just listen to this.
This is Alec Baldwin. I'd like to invite you to listen to my new limited series podcast.
Who cares?
About a true American hero.
That's me, by the way.
Who lived to tell the story of his imprisonment by the Japanese during World War II.
I'm kind of proud of the fact that I'm a survivor.
I
wouldn't want to go back through it, but I wouldn't trade it either. It changed my life completely.
Listen to Ben Steele American on the iHeartRadio app or wherever you get your podcast. This is Alec Baldwin.
Who's really listening to that, right? Who's really listening to the World War II history podcast? Like, come on, you need a little bit of spice. You need a little bit of pizzazz. You know, you need a little bit of entertainment factor. Who's listening to that shit? So, of course, we play around here the greatest game in all of podcasting. And in fact, I'm even joined by the cat. The cat is going to play the game too. Look, this is Romeo. If you're listening to the podcast, you don't get to see him on camera, but look at this cute little guy. Here he is. He's going to try and claw at the mic, but, you know, I refuse. Anyway, so in just a moment, we're going to play Who Wants to Be a Hater, right? And we've got 2 very cringe commercials. How this works is that we pit 2 commercials that are out there. You may have seen them. You may be infuriated by them. And in fact, the fact that we're even acknowledging them, period, almost means that they're already winning, right? Their marketing team is winning because they're making commercials that are so infuriating enough to just make a difference out there, right? It's the thing that we talk about all the time, right? Apparently, all publicity is good publicity. Like, there's no bad publicity, right? It's the same deal with the Transformers bit from the last episode. You know, I wouldn't have an opinion on Transformers if it wasn't for Megan Fox and Shia LaBeouf. And same deal here. Look, I might not have an opinion about any of these companies if it wasn't for the fact that they make such damn terrible commercials, and they're out there now. That's just how it is. They're out there now. So it is time. We will begin. Well, not that one. We will begin the greatest game in all of podcasting history. It may be the only game in podcasting history, but we have to pit two commercials together to determine who wants to be a hater. And, of course, we've got two very fabulous options. One of them comes from AT&T and their latest marketing scheme, their latest marketing little gimmick that they are deciding to put out. And you may have seen some of these commercials out there, each of them more infuriating than the last. You know those gigillionaire commercials that are out there? Each one of them is so annoying. Each one of them is so annoying. And finally, it seems like it is cultivated in the ultimate level of annoying and cringe. And so that will be the first one. And then the second one is a level of cringe in a McDonald's commercial that I almost thought may never be possible. These companies think that they know their marketing demographic so hard, and it turns out that marketing to Zoomers makes for the absolute most just awful content possible. We saw them with the State Farm commercials. We saw them with the sports betting commercials, even though those aren't marketed to Zoomers. Those are marketed to like sad 40-year-old elder millennials that have nothing left to do in life besides sports bet. But the ones that are marketed to the Zoomers are just particularly terrible. So we have these two options, and we will go through them together. And then, of course, the choice will be yours as we take a little tally at the end here. So we've got two of them. I wonder which one we should start with first. The AT&T commercial or the McDonald's commercial. And the McDonald's one, I feel like we might... Actually, nah, I already talked about the AT&T commercial, so we'll start with that one. And then the McDonald's commercial we'll end with, because here's the thing. Normally, I go into Who Wants to Be a Hater with an idea of which one's going to be the most cringe and which one's going to win, right? But this time, I view both of these as equally viable options, right? And so I put the choice to you guys. Like, which one are we really going to go with here? Because there's... I could see either one of them. I really could see either one of them winning. So I don't know. It's tough to say. We'll start with AT&T, right? And this AT&T commercial, as I mentioned earlier, is the culmination of the gigillionaire meme, right? And not the gigillionaire meme, but the gigillionaire line of advertising. And so here is... You know what? I'll just let the commercial speak for itself. Okay, I will just let it speak for itself, and we'll cringe together.
Dude, why'd you put your new rig in the basement?
Didn't you hear? Bill's a gigillionaire now.
Basically, my new connection is so strong I can game anywhere. Check it out. We've got
everybody's
gamer
a gamer.
rocker, gamer floaty, gamer couch.
Whoa.
It's got wheels.
Gamer bench, gamer throne, and gamer mower. What's that?
Oh my gosh.
It's hard to game while walking downstairs.
I get it.
That's smart.
Live like a gagillionaire. With
So apparently, what AT&T thinks all the Zoomers do, right, is they think that all the Zoomers just make everything gamers. And look, if you're a gamer, then clearly everything else that you do in life has to be identified by the fact that you're a gamer. It all has to just branch out. Everything has to be a gamer thing. And by the way, those chairs are terrible. Those chairs are like legitimately the most awful chairs. They're bad for your back too. Gamer chairs are terrible for you. Invest in a real chair. You know, they got some good brands out there. Apparently Herman Miller's pretty good. I don't know. I've never tried one. I've never sat in a good chair in my entire life. So who am I to say? All I know is that gamer chairs are bad for you. They just make you squirm, don't they? They just make you squirm. Like, look, that seems to be the pattern. That seems to be what they do, right? It's just shove gamer in everything. Everything's a gamer thing. They just have such a strong identity as gamers that, you know, we have to bleed that identity of them as gamers into every other aspect of their life. And, you know, I get that I know I'm reading too deep into the ad. I get it. You know, you're not supposed to read that deep into it. It's just an ad. I know. But see, this is what they think of us, right? This is what these marketing firms, this is what they think of us, right? They legitimately think that this is going to speak to somebody. And that's my main problem with it, right? Who the is this speaking to? Like, are they trying to speak to Zoomers? Are they trying to speak to millennials? Like, does anybody actually think this way? Does anybody go out and buy a gamer chair and think, oh, I've got to soup up my whole setup with gamer stuff? Like, I have to make everything that I have a gamer thing. Because after all, I'm a gamer. And if I don't have gamer shit, then, you know, I'm just clearly not a gamer. Actually, you know, the more I say it, the more that seems to make sense. I've known somebody that was like that. Yeah. Most people just don't operate on that high of a frequency, you know. All right. Maybe AT&T has been the mastermind all along. So anyway, here is the next one, which I feel like this is the McDonald's commercial, right? And I feel like this could also be a contender for the winner here. Of course it could, because it's the second option. And McDonald's apparently has ads in Japan. This one is not an ad for Japan. This one was an ad that was made for us stupid Americans capitalizing on the Zoomer meme. And it almost feels like a parody. And yet, because it's a McDonald's ad, there's no way it could actually be a parody, right? So we're about to sit here and analyze some anime, which I never thought I would say before in my entire life. But here we are. I guess.
Shizuru?
Kazuki?
This seat's empty.
Wait, could this be a date?
What?
Go for it.
It's the most obnoxious anime tropes.
Saved.
What?
McDonald's sauce?
And you, Kazuki?
I think we got a winner here. Is that a fun? Look at this. Okay, I can't believe I have to play this again. Is that a burger that's sitting there in the background as one of the McDonald's employees? I get that they're trying to like really, really spice it up and make this as really obnoxiously anime as possible. And if anything, you know, if that's what they're intending to, look, if they're intending this to be a parody, if they're intending this to be just so tongue in cheek that, like if they're intending this to be completely over the top, then you know what? Good on you, McDonald's. You're geniuses. But I have a feeling that the McDonald's marketing directors are not that smart, and they actually intended this to be to appeal to the anime audience right? I think they intended that the person that's actually watching anime and going, oh my gosh, are they going to? Are they not going to? Oh my gosh, I just don't know. They're actually intending that person to watch this and have it hit in their little feelies and have them go, oh, squee, I like it. And go to McDonald's immediately afterwards. Like, I get that that's not the intention. I get the intention is just to remind them that McDonald's exists so that the next time they want food, they'll think, oh, hey, oh yeah, that's right, McDonald's. It's all a psyop, right? Look at this. They capture like ridiculous anime so well too, though.
I love
McDonald's sauce?
What is McDonald's sauce, by the way? I get that that's the marketing thing here, but
Try new savory chili McDonald's sauce only at McDonald's.
savory chili McDonald's sauce. Here's the thing, savory chili sauce actually sounds kind of good, but nah, you can't give in. You can't give in to the advertisement, man. Look at how anime this shit is. Look at how anime this shit is. Like, come on, man. Come on. All right. I get it. So, anyway, those are your two options, right? Those are your two options for this edition of the greatest game show in all of podcasting history. We have the AT&T Gagillionaire. Everybody wants to be a gamer. Everything that they exist and own in has to be a gamer-related thing. Or McDonald's, as we put them all together. And now, the choice is yours. Which one is it? Is it the McDonald's anime ad? Is it the AT&T Gagillionaire, everything is a gamer chair because the gamer chair is the main aesthetic of the gamer-related thing for some reason? I don't know why. Now, personally, I was torn, right? I could see arguments for both of them. The AT&T commercial is cringe. The McDonald's commercial is cringe. And I really could see it going either way. So I'm not going to taint your judgment process. Just go with your heart. Choose the cringe that you think is correct in your heart. And that will be the right decision. Just go with it. Follow what you want. And wherever the chips may fall, so be it. So let me know which one ended up winning Who Wants to Be a Hater this time. We had two equally valid choices, and that will wrap up this edition of Who Wants to Be a Hater. All right, so when we come back, of course, we will wrap up the show, as we do every show, with the classic, the loved Lighthouse Shock Jock Bible study. And this is going to be a fun one, I think. I say fun one as if Bible study is not supposed to be fun. It is supposed to be a bit of service, right? But you know, I think this one is going to be extra powerful, especially as I finally start to reconnect with him a little bit. So we'll get into some of that, and we'll get into a thing that I might have had a problem with. And here's the thing, right? You might also have a problem with this particular thing, right? Because you've heard the idea, right, that God from the Old Testament is kind of wrathful and vengeful, and a lot of the things that stop some people from crossing over right into accepting him is the kind of misbelief in all of that stuff, right? They think, oh, old God is evil, right? He sounds evil. He does some wrathful stuff. He does vengeful stuff, and I don't know if I like that. And here's the thing. I have an argument against that, because I read something interesting on Twitter lately. And so we're going to do something a little bit different for this next edition of Lighthouse Shock Jock Bible Study. We're going to go through this Twitter post, right? And I tended to agree with it, right? Because it kind of contextualized a lot of what people have problems with in the Old Testament. And it's one of those things that I talked about last time, about how, it's something that you have a feeling about, but you can't really put into words. And this Twitter post articulated this feeling into words perfectly, like so perfectly that it really just sparked and catalyzed a new way of thinking about the Old Testament in my head. So I'll go through some of that with you guys in Lighthouse Shock Jock Bible Study when we come back. So stick around. All right, we're back. And it's time for the next edition of Lighthouse Shock Jock Bible Study. Now, I will remind you that, because this one is going on the Bible channel, unlike the one that we did for episode number 11 last week, or a couple days ago, I guess. But this one is going on the Bible Study channel. So if you are watching on the Lighthouse Shock Jock Bible Study channel and you would like to subscribe to the regular show as well, which, don't get me wrong, if you just want to get into the Bible, right, and if you just want to do the Bible study part of the show, then I totally understand, right? That's, completely understandable. You want to remain wholesome and not get dragged down into the depths of reality with the rest of the show, right? I get it, okay? But if you do want to listen to the full show, then you can subscribe on the main channel over at Lighthouse Shock Jock on YouTube. But again, if you want to just follow the Bible portion of it, then you can stay right here on at Lighthouse Shock Jock Bible Study, which is where these segments, look, I don't cut them out of the main show because that is part of my duty, right? That's part of my kind of outreach program with him. That's part of my missionary work as a good Christian. Not a self-proclaimed good Christian, right? It's completely different. It's all an attempt. It's all an effort. But that's just part of what I got to do, right? Is at least try and expose some of the stuff to the people listening to the main show too. But if you're just on board for the Bible study and don't want to listen to the main show, that's okay. But if you want to, then you can head right on over there too. So today, as I kind of reconnect with him a little bit, because, if you listen to the last show and you listen to the Bible study segment that did not go on the Bible channel, it was kind of where I talked about my recent fall off with him, right? Where I started to disconnect with him a little bit and was basically asking for a path back to him, right? If that makes any sort of sense. And he led me to a passage that I didn't quite know why he led me to, but ended up kind of finding out a little bit later, just based on going through it. Look, here's how it works, right? He points you in a direction, and that direction generally tends to show you the way, right? So one of the things that has been on my mind since starting my journey through Christianity, right, and journey through the path that he sets out in front of me, right, which is a thing that I think potentially stops some people from becoming believers, is this idea of all of the stuff that they hear about in the Old Testament, right? Because in the Old Testament, what was referred to as Yahweh, the God of Israel, right? That is the God that we're talking about here, right? And so one of the things that I think stops some people from becoming full-on believers, right, is this idea that, and this all stems from like a take that I read, because there's a certain group of people that I follow on Twitter that's like this kind of esoteric spirituality group of people, right? And a lot of that stems, like a lot of my interest in that stems from, the days of doing drugs, right? And so that was my foray into that world, right? But there's an interesting part of it. Like, I do think that there's some elements of truth in how that kind of shows you how the mechanics of the world work. And ultimately, what led me to God, right, is this idea that, hey, look, he designed the mechanics of the world like this. He kind of sets things out in motion, and however things may happen after that, he sets the rules, right? And the things that happen, the kind of operating figures that happen within the rules that he creates just kind of happens. But it happens under the rules that he sets for us, right? But going back to that earlier point, which is that one of the things that stops, I feel like, some people from becoming believers and even believing in God is this idea that, and here's a common take that some people may have about Old Testament God, right? So the difference between the Old Testament and the New Testament in the Bible is the Old Testament is pre-Jesus, right? And the New Testament is kind of post-Jesus. At least, and that's a very, very simplified way of putting it. But the difference basically is, and how do I put this? I don't want to say, what I thought before, right, was that God kind of expected us all to be perfect in a way. But oh man, I went to church a couple weeks ago, and the message that I got there, like, perfectly put this into words, and I'm trying to find a way to kind of get it back out, right? So it started with Adam, right? Like, in the before times, he made us all in his image to be this image of perfection, right? But then you all know the story of Adam and Eve, right? As soon as the apple gets eaten, right, that kind of that veil of perfection was instantly shattered in that moment. And so then, of course, then Jesus comes along, he dies for all of our sins, right? And infuses the Holy Spirit in each one of us, right? This is why we can kind of hear his voice sometimes. This is why that uncharacteristic voice that pops up in your head occasionally is him, right? So it's the time periods are kind of divided into somewhat Old Testament and New Testament periods where, and I'm not quite entirely sure what the point of that is, right? But again, going back to the original point, circling back, which is, and I know I'm kind of using a roundabout way to get to it, but the thing that stops some people from believing is this idea that Old Testament God is like evil. He's evil, he's wrathful, he's kind of vain. And there was a time where I believed it too, but I just kind of chose to put it on the back burner because I thought, okay, surely he has a reason for this, right? Or, surely there's a deeper meaning behind all of this that we are all missing. Like, certainly there's some context here that we just cannot even fathom, right? And so I read this tweet from one of the spiritual people that I follow, and it's one that I disagree with, so I'm not necessarily going to put this one on the screen, right? And so this one was about sacrifice. This one was kind of a tongue-in-cheek. Jesus was supposed to be the end of all sacrifices. Sacrifice was heavily practiced in pre-Christian times. Fine, cool, I get that. What I don't get is, why would an omnipotent God need sacrifice? Well, it wouldn't. A God, on the other hand, perhaps does. So he's trying to kind of imply that, like, why would an all-loving God require sacrifice to him? And that goes back to a lot of the problems that I and many other people have with the Old Testament, which is, and I talk about this a lot of the times with my stepbrother and his family, right? Where they'll talk about some of the problems that they have with the Old Testament. Like we had a talk one night where they were basically like, okay, so we were going through the Old Testament sometimes and we had to close it and kind of sit with it for a moment and just look up and ask God, like, I don't get it. I don't understand this. I don't understand why you did this. Like, I really don't understand why. And they just kind of acknowledged in that moment that, you know, look, we don't have to have all the answers, but I still, even after that, still kind of had a little bit of an issue with that until I read this post. And we're going to go through some of Exodus a little bit because that, of course, was the story of, you know, of course, the first couple chapters, we're going to start at chapter 3, right? The first couple chapters talk about, you know, Moses being born, right? And so Exodus deals with it kind of deals with the battle between the God of Israel and the exodus, of course, of the Jews from Israel into their own kind of land. It's probably one of the most important books in the Old Testament because it records God's act of saving the Israelites and establishing them as like a covenant community kind of, which is like a nation that he chooses to serve him. So like God kind of takes all the Israelites out of Egypt and leads them across the desert. You've heard the story before. This is one of the most well-known stories in the Bible, right? This is the story of Exodus. And that's kind of how it starts, right? And a lot of the catalyst for that, like one of the central figures in this is, of course, Moses. And the first couple chapters just kind of talks about Moses being born, right? But we've heard the common story about Moses at the burning bush, right? Moses at the burning bush. He kind of listens to it and he goes, excuse me, yes, burning bush? Oh, all right, that's God. And then he brings forth, you know, the 10 Commandments, and you know how it goes, right? You know how it goes. Supposedly this happened around the 1400 BC time, right? So this is all like way, way before Jesus. You know, this is when God, which, you know, they call Yahweh, the God of Israel, he's still kind of making himself known in little pieces and pockets throughout the world, only choosing very specific people, Moses being one of them, of course. And first of all, I'm not sure whether or not we should go through the Bible part of it first or whether or not we should go through the I think we'll go through the Twitter post first, actually. So this comes from a user, and I'm not going to put this on the screen. I'm just going to read it out. This comes from a user named Delusional Path on Twitter as a response to that original post, right? And this, again, this perfectly captures into words some of the problems that I have with the Old Testament and puts them into context and makes it make sense. So I'm going to go through some of this, and maybe some other people that also have some problems with the Old Testament can kind of make peace with that and allow yourself to maybe move on from your problems with it and believe anyway, because I was getting to be in that camp, you know, when I talked about my stepbrother's family and some of the conversations that we were having with each other about how they would have to put down the Old Testament after reading it and go, I don't know, man. Surely you must have had a reason for it. And I would have gotten there eventually, I think, but reading this post definitely helps. He says, from what I gather from reading the Bible, the Old Testament is the reality of the symbolic Ouroboros, which is the kind of the circular nature of how reality works, right? Like the Ouroboros is that image of like the snake eating its tail, right? And it just implies everything goes in a nice little circle. In the Old Testament, you see the cycles of the ebb and flow of light and darkness, which is spiritual warfare, and how when the people were willing to make the sacrifices associated with trusting in God, they won the battle, both literally and figuratively. Of course, as living creatures, we would question why the most high principle of goodness, the logos, the word, the vibration of creation itself, why would God ever sacrifice a life instead of considering what life means to a being that is beyond life? Now, he kind of makes some connections afterward. It's like God equals generator, operator, destroyer, right? It has different names in different cultures. Like he talks about how Sikhs and Hindus and New Age spiritualists would all call him different names. Jews would say Yahweh. A sacrifice is the faithfulness in the belief that God is beyond life. And this is key because, you know, a sacrifice, first of all, implies that, you know, not much is beyond our current realm of reality, right? Because if the idea of a sacrifice is being so sacrilegious, right, then first of all, that just kind of implies that, you know, the life that we have here is kind of it, right? And that's not really, that's a good point. That's not really something that I had considered before, right? Because if we're taking, you know, sacrifice as the end all be all, and this is just one point, by the way, this is a much longer post. If we take a sacrifice as the end all be all, then that just means that, you know, only our lives here on this earth is what matters. That sacrificing makes all of that the most important thing. And it's a very good point that kind of makes you remember, like, wait a minute, if we all have spiritual lives too, and we all have, like he says, faith in the belief that God is beyond life, then what is a sacrifice really all that important for? He continues, it's testimony that God sustains, provides, and brings anew. Most of all, it is the testament of faith. Only through quantum leaps of faith does one become truly great and reap abundant peace and prosperity. Whether that was symbolically by sacrificing part of your herd, part of your crops, tithing to the church, or going all in for what you know to be what is good and right and fruitful by doing everything you know to be honoring to God. Hey, it sounds a little bit like the show. Still, it wasn't knowledge, prophecy, or sacrifice that delivered God's people, those who believe, from suffering. It is always through the faith that is expressed by obedience. We see the clear illustration in the Old Testament of the peril that results from seeking anything but honoring the Most High the Most High good as a principle, always and in everything that one could possibly do in life and death. Death is a part of the cycle of life. Death is also part of war. God isn't just destroying unprovoked in the Old Testament. You see that it's written in Exodus, which is what we're going to go through. He notes Exodus 4:21 through 23, which we're going to get to. We're going to do chapters 3 and 4 of Exodus in just a moment. So we'll re-get to this after we get to this post, right? Then you shall say to the Pharaoh, this is what the Lord says, Israel is my son, my firstborn. So I said to you, let my son go so that he may serve me. But you have refused to let him go. Behold, I am going to kill your son, your firstborn. So something that you'll notice about the Most High, which is, you know, however you refer to God in this instance, is that he doesn't impose upon anyone's free will to force the right action, but he is clear that he will punish the wrong with an equal or greater force. God doesn't need worship to fuel his being. It's necessary to have a relationship with him. God deserves gratitude for our life and glory for his creation, much like how our parents on earth essentially deserve respect and gratitude for our very physical being, even if you have a rough relationship with him. Life and love are a gift, and gifts can also certainly be taken from us. The will of God is evident in every synchronicity we will collectively ever experience. That sounds a lot like the stuff that I talk about. There is a master architect, and gratitude for the beauty of our conscious experience is necessary to strive towards his likeness. The New Testament is the completion of the life and death cycle and the roadmap to transcending the suffering that comes as a result of our wrongdoing onto others as sin. We must sacrifice our desires in order to transcend. We must also believe that we are beyond our guilt, shame, and fear, have been spiritually delivered by Christ, the incarnation of godliness, from our darkness in order to transcend our lower natures, or as some would say, like raise into higher chakras, depending on, you know, kind of where your belief system is, right? Some people believe in in spirituality in different ways like that, even though it all, a lot of the time, ends up being fairly similar in nature. The Old Testament, he continues, is the story of the harsh reality of how we fall short of having faith in the spirit of what is good in all eternity. The same faith bears the fruit of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control, ways of being associated with reciprocating goodwill with others. In both modern and historical society, we see in both the degenerate and sophisticated aspects of societies, debauchery manifests to the highest degree. People sacrifice human babies, enslave others to build monoliths, and even have orgies to pay homage to idols, figures that represent aspects of nature other than the Most High, which is, you know, God, depending on what version of spirituality you're using here. The practices and praises given to those figures did not bear fruit, but that dollar bill in your pocket says, "In God we trust." Christendom has built the world. Falling from those values is destroying it. Let us not equate the illness, that is, inflicting suffering upon others, with corporate punishment and sacrifice in the name of Thee whom is holy. And he goes on a little bit. I'll skip some parts of it. Death and destruction is not evil. Rather, smiting evil is a necessary sacrifice in the name of justice. War was a necessary atonement for evil. It was necessary for us to understand humility beyond the sheer magnitude of the universe through being thwarted. And he goes on in a little bit more about like cycles of different things that results in different things, right? The blessing and curse of free will is being the cause of and receiving the effects of our own choices, good and bad, regardless of our circumstances. In the Bible, the peoples you see truly suffer on behalf of God is God's people. This is also a foreshadowing of what aspiring to a life led by the Spirit is like. The most mocked religion is Christianity. The goal of the enemy in any endeavor is to distort the truth, the Logos, the Christ, the Most High Good. Gratitude is essential vibrationally to overcome our lower natures, to dwell in our heart, then go even further beyond ourselves. And, you know, this is where the enemy comes in and starts to say stuff like, oh, look at your God. He's killing things. God wouldn't kill things. That's a demon. Such is the nature of the people who aspire towards God to bite the fruit, then fall from receiving God's grace, which is so literally living a life of conscious gratitude. It can be hard to read about how the ancient Israelites would go through this vicious cycle. You know, like one, be in paradise, stray from God to justify their animalistic nature, suffer for it, still seek God again, and only then, in that case, would he require a sacrifice, right? So essentially, the point of all this is that the Old Testament is a story of progression. It's the sequence of up and down. It's the ebb and flow and nature of the world. It's basically God saying, like, as I said, or as I read earlier from this article, be in paradise, stray from God to justify their animalistic, innate human nature, then suffer for it, and then still seek God again, right? It's only in those cases that he would require a sacrifice. He requires you to sacrifice something, and it's not necessarily something that is like physical in nature. It could be something metaphorically too. All it kind of tends to imply here, which is what the Old Testament ends up doing, just maybe sometimes via metaphor, is you still do have to sacrifice something, right? The dance of good and evil, this is continuing in the article, really. The dance of good and evil is really the story of the toiling that goes on within us all, physically, mentally, and spiritually, as we go through our conscious experience. Since day one, spirituality has been a matter of how the things we value relate to our beliefs and how our rituals develop our collective being, and the struggle for justice in a world where evil is allowed in order for the alchemical purification of our soul. It kind of reminds me of like the idea of just yin and yang, right? That light can't exist without dark and vice versa. And that's not to say that, the Old Testament is the dark part of that. The Old Testament is dark and the New Testament is light. But it kind of goes to show the innate human nature of all of us. And it makes it seem not entirely unreasonable that, God does some of the stuff that he does in the Old Testament. So is Old Testament God evil? I don't think so. I think it's just, it's tough love. And a lot of the sacrifices that he talks about, again, as I said earlier, this wasn't in the article. This was just some thoughts that I had, right? When he says sacrifice, when sacrifice ends up being like the most important value that you think about when you think about having a problem with Old Testament God, right? When he goes, but he wants us to sacrifice stuff. It's like, well, he wants us to sacrifice. I don't necessarily know if he wanted us to sacrifice like people or animals or what have you, but when sacrificing things, that kind of implies that our place here in the realm of his current kingdom is the most important thing. And it's really not. Like if our spiritual beings are ultimately, meant to ascend to a higher plane and escape that cycle of samsara that some sects of spirituality believe are innately within all of us, then, even metaphorically or physically, sacrifice is kind of necessary, right? And so this brings us to Exodus, because that's what we're going to go through in today's Bible study. We're going to start off with Exodus chapter 3, right? I know that the thing that caused me to go to Exodus, by the way, was that passage from Exodus 4, like 19 through 21, I think, in that Twitter post. It was long enough to be an article, so it could basically just be an article, right? So we're going to go through some of that and go through, the very classic Old Testament story of Moses. We're going to skip the first couple chapters where it's like Moses was born and this is who Moses is and all that stuff. That's basically what the first couple chapters are. So starting at chapter 3, right? Chapter 3 is where Moses at the burning bush comes into play. Now, Moses was tending the flock of Jethro to his father, or Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian. And he led the flock to the back of the desert and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire from the midst of a bush. So he looked, and behold, the burning bush was burning with fire, but the bush was not consumed. Then Moses said, I will now turn aside and see this great sight, why the bush does not burn. So when the Lord saw that, he turned aside to look. God called to him from the midst of the bush and said, Moses, Moses. And he said, Here I am. Then he said, Do not draw near this place. Take your sandals off your feet, for the place where you stand is holy ground. Moreover, he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look upon God. And the Lord said, I have surely seen the oppression of my people who are in Egypt, and have heard their cry because of their taskmasters, for I know their sorrows. So I have come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them up from that land, to a good and large land, to a land flowing with milk and honey, to a place of the Canaanites and the Hittites and the Amorites and the Perizzites and the Hivites and the Jebusites, Now therefore, behold, the cry of the children of Israel has come to me, and I have also seen the oppression with which the Egyptians oppressed them. So this is the start of it, right? This is, you've heard the classic. There have been so many jokes made about it in pop culture about how, look, Moses is at the burning bush, and this is him directly communicating with God, right? And, for some people that might not have necessarily read it directly, this is exactly how it is. This is, I like how God basically told Moses, like, look, take off your sandals. This is holy ground that you're walking on here. This is important. Pay attention. Listen up. I also like how, I don't know if I like it necessarily, but Moses hid his face for he was afraid to look upon God, right? And it's important because that might not necessarily be something that we would do today, right? I'm not necessarily sure if that was something that was out of fear or if it was something that was out of respect, or maybe it was a little bit of both, honestly, because I will admit that, if I was in that situation, it would be hard not to look, right? It would be hard not to be like, to not satisfy your little curiosity like that. Like, hey, I wonder what God does look like. And then, of course, then God's talking about how, okay, look, I've heard the cry of your people who are being basically slave driven by the Egyptians. And so God said, all right, I'm deciding, I got you guys. I'm going to take you out of there, and I'm going to set you off on a new path. I'm going to give you new land, fresh with milk and honey, and you will be my chosen people, basically, is what God's saying to Moses. And then Moses continues, or God continues, come now, therefore, and I will send you to the Pharaoh so that you may bring my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. But Moses said to God, who am I that I should go to the Pharaoh and that I should bring the children of Israel out of Egypt? So he said, I will certainly be with you, and this shall be a sign to you that I have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you shall serve God on this mountain. Then Moses said to God, indeed, when I come to the children of Israel and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you, and they say to me, what is his name? What shall I say to them? And God said to Moses, I am who I am. And he said, thus you shall say to the children of Israel, I am has sent me to you. Moreover, God said to Moses, thus you shall say to the children of Israel, the Lord God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob has sent me to you. This is my name forever, and this is my memorial to all generations. Go and gather the elders of Israel together, and say to them, the Lord God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and of Jacob, appeared to me, saying, I have surely visited you, and seen what is done to you in Egypt. And I have said, I will bring you up out of the affliction of Egypt to the land of the Canaanites, and the Hittites, and the Amorites, and the Perizzites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites, to a land flowing with milk and honey. Then they will heed your voice, and you shall come, you and the elders of Israel, to the king of Egypt, and you shall say to him, the Lord God of the Hebrews has met with us, and now please let us go 3 days' journey into the wilderness, that we may sacrifice to the Lord our God. But I am sure that the king of Egypt will not let you go, no, not even by a mighty hand. So I will stretch out my hand, and strike Egypt with all my wonders, which I will do in its midst. And after that, he will let you go. And I will give this people favor in the sight of the Egyptians. And it shall be, when you go, that you shall not go empty-handed, but every woman shall ask of her neighbor, namely of her who dwells near her house, articles of silver, articles of gold, and clothing, and you shall put them on your sons and daughters. So you shall plunder the Egyptians. So this is basically, of course, God tells Moses, right? And Moses kind of has the natural questions that people are going to have if they hear from God. Like, all right, look, I'm going to free all of your people from slavedom. I'm going to take you to a new land, and I'm going to set you all free, and you're going to be my chosen people. So naturally, of course, Moses has those questions. It's like, wait, what should I tell the people when they ask me, so how are we going to do this? How are we going to go? What am I even going to tell them? Like, should I tell them that God told me to do this? Is that really what I should tell them? And of course, because he's God responds to him and goes like, yeah, just tell him I am who I am. I don't need to justify myself to you. I don't need to justify that. I am who I am. That's just how it is. And he gives Moses like clear and specific instructions on what to do. But every woman shall ask of her neighbor, namely of her who dwells near her house, articles of silver, articles of gold and clothing, and you shall put them on your sons and on your daughters, so you shall plunder the Egyptians. And, of course, I like when Moses asks too, or God tells Moses, of course the Egyptian's not going to let you go, but don't worry, I'm going to strike him down. Just you wait, Go tell him that we're going to need to go in 3 days. Okay. We're going to need to go for 3 days, but he's not going to let you. You really think he's going to let you do that? No. All right. Well, just don't worry. Just, I'll take care of it. I'll strike him down. Don't you worry about that. I kind of like it, and this is why, that Twitter post ended up bringing me to, this part of the Old Testament, right? Because it starts off, this is one of those things that cause people to have problems with Old Testament God, right? It's like Old Testament God sounds vain, but no, it's just in a way. It is one of those things that implies okay, look, you're thinking about your worldly relation to what is going on with you in your situation with you and the Egyptians, right? Meanwhile, God is thinking on such a heavenly scale. God is that guy that's playing 4D chess with everything, right? And that kind of between this and that Twitter post that I was reading earlier, it's yeah, sure, it may sound kind of crude, and it may sound like that, you have a problem with it, or it may sound like something that, something that's not a just God would do. But you really read it and you really look into it. It's look, there's a clear reason for it. There's a clear reason for that. There's a clear reason for everything, right? It's, as I said earlier, it's the ebb and flow. It's the ebb and flow. It's the Ouroboros of humanity. It's, okay, Moses, you and your people have suffered. Your people have suffered in my name, but because you suffered in my name, now I see you. I'm going to give you land, and you are now going to be my people, right? So moving on to chapter 4, right? This is where I believe this is where Moses starts to go to the Pharaoh, right? Then Moses answered and said, but suppose they will not believe me or listen to my voice. Suppose they say, the Lord has not appeared to you. So the Lord said to him, what is that in your hand? Moses said, a rod. And he said, cast it on the ground. So he cast it on the ground, and it became a serpent, and Moses fled from it. So, look, I feel like Moses was on board, right? Despite the fact that Moses had the most reasonable questions that any of us would ask. Look, you're talking to a burning bush, and that burning bush is talking to you, and that burning bush is God, right? Of course, you sitting there, even Moses, right? You're sitting there probably going to ask some questions. So, what am I going to tell people? Am I really going to tell people that's God? And so God is so finally when Moses confronts him and asks him, all right, so what am I going to do? Suppose people don't believe me. So what do I do now? And then God's all right, so throw that stick you have on the ground. And then God just, boom, turns it into a snake. And the snake just, you're not going to not believe after that. You're not going to look at God instantly turning a stick into a snake and go, I don't know about that. Then the Lord said, so starting at verse 4 in chapter 4, then the Lord said to Moses, reach out your hand and take it by the tail. And he reached out his hand and caught it, and it became a rod in his hand. that they may believe that the Lord God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has appeared to you. Furthermore, the Lord said to him, now put your hand in your bosom. And he put his hand in his bosom, and when he took it out, behold, his hand was leprous like snow. And he said, put your hand there again. So he put his hand in his bosom again, and drew it out of his bosom, and behold, it was restored like his other flesh. Then it will be, if they do not believe you, nor heed the message of the first sign, that they may believe the message of the latter sign. And it shall be, if they do not believe even these two signs, or listen to your voice, that you shall take water from the river, and pour it on the dry land. The water which you take from the river will become blood on the dry land. Then Moses said to the Lord, O my Lord, I am not eloquent, neither before nor since you have spoken to your servant, but I am slow of speech and slow of tongue. So the Lord said to him, who has made man's mouth? Or who makes the mute, the deaf, the seeing, or the blind? Have not I, the Lord? Now therefore go, and I will be with your mouth, and teach you what you shall say. But he said, O my Lord, please send by the hand of whomever else you may send. So the anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses, and he said, is not Aaron the Levite your brother? I know that he can speak well. And look, he is also coming out to meet you. When he sees you, he will be glad in his heart. Now you shall speak to him, and put the words in his mouth, and I will be with your mouth and with his mouth, and I will teach you what you shall do. So he shall be your spokesman to the people, and he himself shall be as a mouth for you, and you shall be to him as a God, and you shall take this rod in your hand with which you shall do the signs. I think this is interesting, right? Because it seems like, you know how, and this will happen a lot in life, right? Where you'll be talking to somebody, right? Maybe with the intention of trying to get advice from that person. And how many times has this happened before in life where you'll be talking to somebody, trying to get advice from them, and as you're getting advice from that person, it's stuff that you know that you should do, right? Like Moses knows that this is what he's got to do now. He just saw God take his hand, put it on his butt, and turn it into a leprosy hand, and then instantly change it back. He also just saw God turn a stick into a snake, right? So Moses knows, he's got to know by now that this is the real deal. So how many times are you talking to somebody, trying to get advice from them, but as you're getting advice from that person, you have every last excuse in the book. Like you're getting told, all right, well, you should do this. You should maybe think this way. And meanwhile, you're giving off all the excuses like, oh, but, I just have this excuse and I have this excuse and I can't do this because of this and I can't do this because of this. That's what Moses is doing here to God. And God's just like, look, and you could hear it earlier. I forget exactly which verse it is. Verse 14. So the anger of the Lord was kindled with Moses, right? Like God's starting to get upset. He's getting upset here because Moses is being one of those guys. He's being one of those like reply guys on social media that's just kind of coming out and going, but I can't do that. I can't do that. I'm not a good speaker. And God's just kind of giving an answer to every last excuse that Moses has. And that has to be, that there's got to be a lesson there, right? There's got to be a lesson there to stop giving excuses. When you get a message from God, right? God is giving you a message for a reason. He's giving you the message to go do it, and he's going to take care of whatever excuses that you may have. And should you question it, that seems to be where some of his ire comes from. And it seems like it's rightfully so. Like, look, don't get me wrong. Like, none of us are even close to being as perfect as God. But how many times have you tried to give advice to somebody and that person that you're giving advice to, like, starts to give all the excuses? Like, well, I can't do this because of this. I can't do this because of this. And they give every last excuse in the book. Like, it makes you a little bit angry, right? So, of course, it's going to make God angry, right? And this goes back to the entire idea of the segment that, like, this is one of the reasons that people get upset at Old Testament God is because, like, it seems like Old Testament God is angry. It's like, would you not be angry? Would you not also be angry in this situation? Like, if you were God here, would you not be angry at Moses? Because Moses is being a whiny little, word that I'm not going to say in the Bible study segment because it's the Bible study segment, right? Would you not be angry at Moses if you were God here? Because Moses is just kind of sitting there whining, going like, but I can't. but you can, and I'm going to take care of it for you. And if that's not a lesson to like the rest of us in life, then, you know, it kind of clear as day here. So starting at verse 18, right? So Moses went and returned to Jethro, his father-in-law, and said to him, please let me go and return to my brethren who are in Egypt and see whether they are still alive. And Jethro said to Moses, go in peace. Now the Lord said to Moses in Midian, go return to Egypt, for all the men who sought your life are dead. Then Moses took his wife and his sons and set them on a donkey, and he returned to the land of Egypt. And Moses took the rod of God in his hand, and the Lord said to Moses, when you go back to Egypt, see that you do all those wonders before the Pharaoh which I have put in your hand. But I will harden his heart so that he will not let the people go. Then you shall say to the Pharaoh, thus says the Lord, Israel is my son, my firstborn. So I say to you, let my son go, that he may serve me. But if you refuse to let him go, indeed I will kill your son, your firstborn. And it came to pass, on the way at the encampment, that the Lord met him and sought to kill him. Then Zipporah took a sharp stone and cut off the foreskin of her son and cast it at Moses' feet and said, surely you are a husband of blood to me. So he let him go. Then she said, you are a husband of blood because of the circumcision. And the Lord said to Aaron, go into the wilderness to meet Moses. So he went and met him on the mountain of God and kissed him. So Moses told Aaron all the words of the Lord who had sent him and all the signs which he had commanded him. Then Moses and Aaron went and gathered together all the elders of the children of Israel, and Aaron spoke all the words which the Lord had spoken to Moses. Then he did the signs in the sight of the people. So the people believed, and when they heard the Lord had visited the children of Israel, and that he looked on their affliction, then they bowed their heads and worshipped. So that's the rest of that's the rest of chapter 4. And it's God doing exactly what he was going to say, right? And remember when Moses said earlier in the first couple verses of chapter 3, where Moses is like, yeah, but the Pharaoh's not going to let us go. But then God said, look, don't worry, I'll take care of that. And he did. And he did exactly what he was going to do. And again, this the common theme of tonight's Bible study segment is to answer that question about Old Testament God. And of course, you have to go through it yourself to see whether or not God was justified in doing any of this stuff. And what I want to know from you guys is, like, as you hear this, is like, and we're going to continue to go through more of this stuff, is what do you think about whether or not God was justified in doing any of this stuff? Like, of course he was. Like, remember when he said to the Pharaoh, thus says the Lord, Israel is my firstborn, or Israel is my son, my firstborn, like the people of Israel. So I say to you, let my son go so that he may serve me. But if you refuse to let him go, indeed, I will kill your son, your firstborn. And this goes back to that Twitter post that we were talking about earlier, the one that caused me to kind of like look at this passage in the first place, right? He's not destroying unprovoked in the Old Testament. Something you'll notice is that he doesn't impose upon anyone's free will to force the right action, but it is clear that he will punish the wrong action with an equal or greater force. Like, he's still giving you the choice in that situation. He's still giving the Pharaoh the choice in that situation. Like, look, I am allowing you to choose to do the right thing, and if not, you will be punished. Like, that doesn't completely sound unreasonable to me, right? You know, that even now, you know, if we do bad things, we get punished for it. Like, that's just kind of the ebb and flow. That's the Ouroboros of nature. That's the ebb and flow of, like, good and evil. That's just how things work, man. So that's chapter 3 and 4 of Exodus. We're going to continue to, I don't know if we'll continue to go through Exodus next time, but we'll definitely find some Old Testament passages, ones that people tend to have problems with, so that we can go through it ourselves, right? And see whether or not, you know, the common adage that people have. Remember, as I said earlier, a lot of the common things that stop people from being believers is that idea that, like, Old Testament God is evil and wrathful, and that's just not something that I can believe in. But, you know, when you go through it yourself, you kind of see that it's a little bit justified, and it goes through some of the rules of, or it abides by a lot of the human nature rules of our world, right? So this is one of those situations that, you know, you just let me know what you think about this, because we're going to continue to go through some more Old Testament stuff, particularly like some controversial and spicy Old Testament stuff. That way we can see, you know, because one of the things that I said at the beginning of my journey down God's path is that, like, look, I can't honestly say that I have a problem with any of this stuff until I've gone through it myself. So we're going to go through all of it together, right? And for the time being, this was the one that came up this week as I was reading a nice justification that put into words like, actually, no, Old Testament God's fine. You know, you just have to look at it a certain way, right? And so with that new context in mind, like, what do you think about this? What do you think about, especially if you've read some of the other, you know, spicy parts of Old Testament, right? I would be curious as to what you think, or what some of your personal struggles have been with it. Because, again, I've talked before about how, you know, I've had some chats with my family about how they'll go through the Old Testament sometimes and they'll have to close it and go, man, I don't know about that, God. I don't know. I'm sure you must have had a reason for it, but that was probably just incomprehensible to me, but I don't know about that. But so far, right? So far, to me, it seems fairly justified, right? God gave everybody the option to do what he wants them to do, and they were only punished when they strayed from it, right? And, you know, I get that as we get further into New Testament, the idea of redemption comes further into play, which is why I do think that, you know, a lot of the lessons in New Testament are particularly important too. But I don't know. It's tough to say for now until we continue to go more through it, but I'm curious what you think about it. So let me know if you have any other, like, particularly spicy Old Testament passages that you, like, have problems with. Then, you know, like, leave a comment about that, and maybe that'll be something that we go through next time, and we can do that. We can do some of that stuff together. So that was the first foray, I think, into the Old Testament for us in Lighthouse Shock Jock Bible Studies. So next time, of course, actually, I guess I should do the influencer bit first. All right. Let me put on the influencer cap. Prep for it. Don't forget to follow, like, and subscribe, and leave a comment. Ugh, gross. I hate it. I hate doing that. I'm not going to do that. But yeah, let me know what you think about any of this stuff. So next week, of course, we will return once again live at midnight Eastern on Friday. I will open the phone lines next week too. Well, because I know we didn't necessarily get to it this week because I still had some work to do with it. But look, next week we're gonna open the phone lines. Okay, we're just gonna crack it right open, get the live show truly started. Definitely have some fun stuff for next week planned. I don't, and we'll think about that over the next week. But it'll happen. It'll happen. Trust me. So, as always, do not forget to subscribe if you are listening to the main show and you want to subscribe to the Bible study channel. Then the Bible study channel is at Lighthouse Shock Jock Bible Study on YouTube. And if you are listening to the Lighthouse Shock Jock Bible Study channel and want to subscribe to the main show too, then it's just Lighthouse Shock Jock, right? It's, again, the Bible study does not get cut out of the main show. It just gets kind of clipped and put on the Bible study channel just in case you only want to follow along the Bible journey that we are all going on together and with God, together and with him. That one should be the most important, but we're all together in this. We're all in this together. Right? Anyway, so that'll do it for tonight. Love you all. We'll see you next week. Again, if you want the uncensored version without all the F words, podcast will be out tomorrow. If you can handle the F words, the live show VOD will remain on the channel. But until next week, bye.
Do I look like I know what a JPEG is? I just want a picture of a goddamn hot dog.